Welcome to the second episode of the Eightfold Path to Poker Enlightenment. Today, Tommy will be talking about right thinking. I'm Wayne Lively, and I'll be doing the listening and leaving the thinking to Tommy Angelo. As always, we'll be discussing topics which are for all poker players, whether you play live or online, limit or no limit. This is not about how to play poker, it's about becoming a poker player. Let's see what Tommy's got cooking today.
Well, Wayne, we've got a big menu lined up here. We're going to be talking about position. We're going to be talking about anticipation. We're going to be going into this concept I call the door A, door B. We're going to introduce reciprocality, which is going to have an entire episode dedicated to it later. We're going to touch a little bit on the Rake and the rules, and then we're going to start off talking about one of my favorite topics, which is lopping off the C game. Not that you would know anything about the C game, Wayne.
It's the only game I got.
Well, great. That makes you an excellent test subject.
My mom's going to be so proud. I'm a crash test dummy.
So, Wayne, let me ask you something. Do you ever think to yourself, do you ever wonder what your win rate would be if you didn't have a C game?
Better than it is now?
Like, yeah, like dramatically?
I would guess.
So when let's say that
you don't realize how bad my C or big or good. Would it be a good C game?
It's extreme.
Phenomenal.
So describe it.
I play after work. I berate the fish. I play too many hands. I play too many to the river. Position doesn't seem to be something that I'm really all that interested in, because there are a lot of times when if I play in position, I'm not playing enough hands, and I'm not able to raise too many times. And
that's a top-notch C game.
I got a great one. I got a great one.
You have A plus C game.
Yeah, so if I lop off the C game, I'm not sure what I'm going to have left.
Money. Lots of money.
That works for me. All right, let's get to it.
So let's talk about the first thing you said, playing after work. Okay, this is a fundamental problem that most people have, is they have a job. And but if you think about it, let's say that you were playing for a living. Would you ever think to design your day like, okay, I think what I'll do is go something that takes up a lot of my energy for like 8 hours, drive around for a while, and then go try to make money? Well, of course not. One of the big advantages professionals have is they can play during the peak hours of their wakefulness, which is typically the first 8 hours we're up. So right there, when it comes to C game, you're walking right into it every night because you're already at the end of the day. Not that there's anything you can do about it, but to lop off, one way to lop off C game would be to quit your job and only play, when you're wide awake.
A guy the other day asked me if I played for a living. I said, well, it's not much of a living.
Well, yeah, it is a tough way to make an easy living. That much is definitely true. So in terms of lopping off a C game there, what you need to do is try to recreate the conditions that put you at your physical optimum, even though it's the end of your day. You do the best you can, meaning take a really good break, do some push-ups, sit-ups, a walk, whatever you got to do. Really discipline yourself to be as physically fit, mentally and physically, as you can when you walk in the casino or when you sit down at the computer to play. So that's one actual thing that you can do to lop off some C game. In theory, you're going to play a little bit better by feeling a little bit better.
Can I eat a big meal?
No. Don't eat a big meal.
Oh, okay.
Eat a modest meal. Many
have a couple
calories.
Of drinks?
Many calories will. That's called like not whatever the opposite of lopping off the C game would be. That would be like adding on the C game.
How about a couple of drinks?
Well, I don't know.
That doesn't
work
for you either.
No.
You're a drag, man.
So if you could, the thing that makes lopping off the C game a right thinking topic is just the idea of focusing on it, of recognizing, man, if you could just lop it off, then that would rate to have a dramatic effect on
Absolutely.
your score. Okay, so one way of looking at it is everyone has a C game all the time. Let's say that your current C game is like you described, at its very
Great.
worst. Yeah, a great C game. And let's say that your earn rate at that time is -2 big bets an hour or 2 big blinds per 100 or whatever. We'll just call it -2. Okay. Now, when I say lop off the C game, I don't mean convert it directly to A plus game. What we're talking about is making it be your current worst. So if you look at your last worst session and you're driving home, you're like, wow, I was at my absolute worst. The objective is to never hit that low spike again. So your next incident of terrible play, at least it isn't that bad. And so when you lop off the C game, what happens is your B game becomes your new C game. So you still have a C game, it's just that it isn't as bad as it used to be. And this is the gradual progression we sort of touched on in the first episode, talking about working on improving from the bottom up. So your next episode might be at an earn rate of -1.5 big bets an hour because you've lopped off the previous C game, and now your current worst is not as bad as it used to be.
So I'll go from being a D student to a C student, and that will be a marked improvement.
It is an improvement. When guys are thinking about hiring me and they're like, well, can you make me a winner at poker? I'm like, well, I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure that if you do some of the things we talk about, losing less is a form of winning, right? It's an improvement. So that's the attitude you want to take.
Boy, now that's something. Folks, if you want to know what Zen is, that's it. Not winning, but losing less.
Well, it's a move in the right direction, that's for sure. So let's talk about one specific area where C game shows up, which is, typically when somebody's off their game, they play too many hands or more hands than they would play if they're on their A game. Would you say that's a typical symptom of when you're off whack?
Absolutely.
So if we're looking for how we can gradually lop off the previous C game, then what you do is
take away a seat.
Take away a what?
Take away a seat.
A seat?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Well, that way if there's only 8 seats at the table, I'm only going to play 8 hands instead of 10.
Oh. Well, I hadn't thought of that. So
Yeah,
if you
so
play
you
heads
need to
up,
think
you
of
would
that.
have like no C game?
No, none whatsoever.
That's an interesting theory.
I'd only play 2 hands.
So let's say you wanted to specifically work on lopping off the portion of your C game that is playing too many hands. Then what you want to do is use awareness and recognize that, okay, when I'm in my C game, I play too many hands. So then you want to come up with exercises that you can do so that when you're in your C game, you won't play as many hands. One really handy thing I've come up with is what I call Group D hands. I arrange all the hands into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. And we might go into those, they're in my book. But the most useful one for lopping off the C game, in fact, it's the only thing it's about is Group D.
And what would that book be, folks? It would be Elements of Poker by Tommy Angelo. Just thought we would get that plug in. Okay, we're back.
Who was that guy? So Group D hands are the hands you determine that you are never going to play. And what I mean by that is not just the hands, but situations. It's a combination of the position and the situation. For example,
hands that don't have anything on the card. They're totally blank.
Right.
I don't play those.
Well, let's look at some that actually do have some spots.
Okay.
So, now let me ask you. So let's say you are in the big blind, playing limit hold'em. It's folded all the way around to the button. And I like to make my examples, extreme to shine light on the point. Okay. So let's say that guy is raising 100% of the hands. Okay.
Okay.
And the small blind folds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you play 7 deuce offsuit?
No.
Okay, so what we've established here is that there are some hands in this situation you believe you should always fold.
Right.
Okay, so what you do with the Group D concept is you keep raising that line. We're not going to do that right now. We keep asking the question, would you fold, would you play 7-3, would you play 8-3, would you play 9-4? And you keep going up until in your world you hit the bar that you think, okay, I should never play any hands below that. So rather than get in a strategy discussion, we're just going to make it 10-7. Just going to pull that out of my ass. Okay?
Unsuited?
Unsuited. Okay.
Whoa, that's a good hand. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to say that you determined in Wayne's world, sorry, that had to be said at some point.
Gee, that's original. Whoa, who didn't see that one coming?
That you've determined that of the 10 high hands, that even in this situation, you should fold 10-7 and down. That means 10-6, 10-5, all those 10 hands.
Oh, I thought I was playing 10-7.
Okay, well, you're playing 10-7 and you're folding 10-6, whatever. Somewhere here's your line.
But okay.
So you've determined that you should always fold 10-6 offsuit, no matter who's raising, no matter how often they raise, anytime you're defending in the big blind against a button raise.
Okay.
Okay. Once you've made that determination, we're not trying to determine whether that's correct or not. Who knows? As we know, there's gray area, and all of these discussions are going to zero in on some gray area. So, but you've decided within your game that you feel that this is where you should draw the line. So now, let's say you're in your C game. Everything's going bad. You're at the very worst. You're tired. You ate too much. And the guy who raised on the button is a complete dick who you hate and you can't wait to knock him off. And you're sitting there and you've got 10-5. Now, in the old days, because you're on your C game, you would have played it. But because you've used this Group D concept, you've determined, hey, I'm always going to fold this hand, no matter what. So if you can do this, if you can do this exercise of 1, determining where your bars are in all these situations, and 2, remembering this while you're playing, this is lopping off the C game. You have literally lopped off C game by zeroing in on a line that you decided you'll never go below.
Okay, so now we get to door A and door B. You're going to make me make choices, right? You know that makes my head hurt.
Well, I'm going to point out to you that you're always making choices, and all of them matter. And that's the whole idea of door A and door B, is you see every choice as being better or worse than the alternative. And no choice is made in isolation. So when somebody says, well, do you think I should have bet? Well, whenever I hear that question in a betting problem, I automatically think, should you have bet compared to checking? So it isn't should I bet. You're always comparing betting to checking. You're always comparing checking to betting. You're always picking door A or door B. And we start with the assumption that we can't assume that one of them is better than the other, but you always want to be looking for the one that's better than the other. And so this door A, door B concept applies to every betting decision. But even more importantly, the reason we have this under right thinking is because this is a big metagame thing. You can say, okay, if I have 3 glasses of wine, then I'm going to get whatever's behind door A. You know, like in that old TV show, Let's Make a Deal.
Big headache.
Right, and then go play poker. If I have no wine, I get what's behind door B. Money, profit.
Oh, okay.
Remember?
Okay. So, that's what I'm here for. Okay.
So the difference between this door A, door B, and the doors in Let's Make a Deal is that we know what's behind the doors. You know that if you put effort toward tilting less and staying calm and rational and focused right after you've taken 3 bad beats, that's door A. That is going to have more money behind it than door B, which is tilting. Now,
that'll also be the day. Okay.
Well, but the idea of this concept is to see everything as a choice. Every single thing. From what kind of gasoline you buy is a door A, door B choice. Most of the choices we make don't have anything to do with our poker. But what we want to do is start recognizing the ones that do have something to do with our poker and making the right choice over and over. And this has to do with everything: game selection, seat selection, poker side selection, rake back selection. Every single thing is a choice. Every single thing is you have an option. And you want to keep looking under every single stone for every little bit of edge and profit. You know, we've been taught by Roy Cook and many others over the years to look for every little edge you can. But he's talking about betting strategy, and he's right. You need to look for every edge. And all I'm doing is taking this concept and widening it out, a wider umbrella. For
true metagame.
Yeah, true metagame. And you start seeing everything as a door A or door B option. Next, we're going to go into position. So, what do you think about position?
I like it on top.
Oh, you mean you like it when you're winning?
Oh, yeah, that too.
Oh, that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Position is one of these topics that gets a lot of airtime, but it seems to me that it really isn't taught in a way that goes right to the core issue.
You
And,
mean having position is better than being out of position?
well, when people say in position, to me there's only one position that's in position, which is last. If you're anything other than last, then it automatically means that someone else is last. So there's really only two positions. There's last and non-last.
In position or out of position?
Right, right. But sometimes when people say out of position, they're talking about like multi-way pots.
Uh-huh.
So let's say there's four people in the pot after the flop, and a guy's next to last. He might say, if he's first or second to act, he might use the phrasing, "I'm out of position." But if he's next to last, he might say, "I had good position." And that's why I think the words are just screwed up, because there's only one good position, last, period. Anything other than that is inferior, because, kind of touching on the door B concept, if you're not last, then somebody is. And whoever is last has a huge advantage on every street of every hand, no matter what.
Didn't you come up with an acronym for this?
I did. I had two of them, heads up first to act and heads up last to act, which is HULTA and HUFTA. I use these with my clients, two reasons. One, is because it's just simple and fast, and two, just by labeling things in and of itself gives us more control over them and shines light on the importance of them.
I don't think people really do fully understand position and the importance of it.
Well, the beautiful thing about position is you don't have to understand anything about it. It's so fundamentally profitable to be last comparing to non-last that I wrote a little spacey little thing about this in my book that I would like to read. It's on page 177, and the section is called Acting Last, and it's very short. I'm going to read it right now. Acting last is like taking a drink of water. We don't have to understand why it's good for us to know that it is, and the benefits are unaffected by our understanding of them.
So, what does that mean in my terms?
What it means is you should adjust your betting strategy in a way that results in you being last to act more than them.
No, it doesn't. What it means in my terms, folks, is that position good. Don't need to know why, just know position good.
Exactly. You really don't. It's exactly like that. It's just like drinking water. You don't need to understand the biology of cell mechanics to know for a fact that drinking water is good for you.
Now, you and I have had discussions on this, and you changed my mind on this. I thought that dominance is a lot more important than you do.
Now, we're talking about dominated hands like ace 10, ace jack,
exactly,
and all that,
and
right?
You showed me that position trumps dominance to the point where dominance really isn't as critical as I thought it was.
Yeah, that's right. It's to whatever extent it's fair to say that something is overrated or underrated, which is a vast judgment that I typically don't like to make. But if we allow that language, I do believe that dominance is overrated. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say the player in the cutoff has king queen, and the player on the button has king jack. We would say, oh well, the guy with the king jack is dominated. Look out, he's in trouble. But if the player and this applies to limit or no limit. If the player in the cutoff raises, and the guy on the button with the king jack re-raises, who's most likely to win this hand? Most of the time, both people are going to miss the flop. And when the hand plays out, the vast majority of the time, the person on the button is going to win that hand, whether he started with the king queen or the king jack. It doesn't even matter, right? So the position trumps the dominance factor. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and why I believe that dominance is overrated, is you could say, well, what about when a king comes? Then you got big problems. Well, again, two things. First of all, the guy who's last doesn't have big problems. That's because he is last. Let's say he's playing no limit. He can check behind on a street and keep the pot small, maybe not even pay off. Checking behind might induce bluffs when he does have the best hand. there's just so many permutations to go through that demonstrate that being last is going to be cheaper when the domination situation really does come up, and also make more money when it doesn't. If you're playing limit hold'em, he's probably only going to lose 2 bets combined on the turn and river. If he's out of position, he might lose 3 because he bets and gets raised and pays off, right? So again, if you're in position, the effect of being dominated is diminished, so the position comes in. But now here's the key thing. What's the probability that a king is going to come on the flop?
Same as with a set.
Exactly. It's the same as with a set, which, as we know, never happens often enough when we have the pair.
Certainly doesn't happen for me.
So the one time when it really matters is when that common card comes, and that's very rare. So the positional consequence of whoever's last to act, far outweighs this, dominated worry.
Which shows how important position is, because it actually makes the worst hand the better hand.
Yeah. You could even say that position dominates dominance.
I know what's coming next.
Okay. I call.
Anticipation.
Wow, you're a very good prognosticator.
I bet that's not the anticipation you mean.
Well, you did anticipate that we're going to talk about anticipation.
Wow.
Very well done.
Okay, so tell me about anticipation.
Well, here's what I'd like to tell you. It's a really, really good idea to anticipate.
I didn't anticipate that.
Here's what I'd like to say about anticipation. If you bet or you raise and the other guy raises and you weren't ready for it, you blew it. You blew that street. You screwed it up. And here's why.
That's way cool.
Yeah, here's why. When you bet or raise, if he folds, the whole hand's over. You have nothing else to do. There was nothing to anticipate if he folds. If he calls, then you have nothing to do until the next street. So you have no reason to be like in an anticipatory state if he calls. The only thing that you ever need to anticipate is a raise when you've bet or raised. Or if you've checked, the only thing you need to anticipate is a bet. So the idea here is, in theory, if you're good at anticipation, which you want to be, you should never, ever, ever be surprised, especially playing online where you're not going to get any physical inference. So for example, he checks, you bet, he check raises. At that moment, in theory, you should never be making your decision right then. You should have already decided. And if you decide in advance what you're going to do if he check raises before you bet, this is why you want to anticipate, because A, it will make your bet better. It'll make you more likely to make a good bet when you've already considered, okay, even if there's only a 2% chance he's going to check raise, you want to have it in your matrix, in your decision matrix. And the other thing that makes it really good is if you've decided in advance, okay, if I bet and he raises, I'm folding, and you know that that's the right play, you'll make it because you won't be attached. But if you wait and you bet and then he check raises and then you're like, oh, let's see, now what should I do? There's a less probability that you'll make the right fold if you should make the fold or re-raise or whatever the best play should be.
So is this part of having a plan for the hand?
It's more like having a plan for the street. My friend Matt Flynn talks about playing the hand in his book, which is great, especially he's talking about no limit, and it applies to limit. But absolutely playing the hand. But what I'm talking about here is specifically the street. Now, you can say anticipate, you're going to play the hand like, okay, I'm going to check the turn, and then I'm going to check behind on the turn, and if he bets the river, I'm going to call. That's a form of anticipation that's two streets long. That's more like planning the hand, and that's great too. And that's an important anticipation aspect. But the one I'm talking about here is getting caught with your pants down, where within one street, a guy makes a better raise, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, now what? That's what you want to never do. It's really, really hard.
It is really hard.
Very hard. But
because you're often surprised. You expect them to fold or you expect them to call, but you rarely expect them to check raise you.
Yeah.
It's always
like, oh my God, now what?
Yeah, it's the deer in the headlights. I've been caught.
But if you think about it, there's nothing else to anticipate. There's literally nothing else he can do that's going to call on you to act right now on that street. So you think about the logic about it, there's really nothing else you should be thinking about, right? I mean, it just makes perfect sense. And
but do you think of why he's check raising? I mean, what's your thought process? I mean, it should.
This is why
there should be a reason why he check raises.
Absolutely. So what you do is you start thinking about that beforehand. So he checks, and now it's up to you to bet. And if you this takes training. This takes real practice, but it's very, very much worth it because it makes your betting better. And again, what this whole series is about is tiltlessness, about playing well as often as you possibly can and enjoying it as much as you can. And that moment of being caught off guard, that's a tilty kind of moment. It's like, oh shit, now what?
Sure,
That's an
yeah.
emotional spike. That's exactly what we're trying to eliminate. And so by anticipating, you're smoothing out your emotional life because you're ready all the time, just like a samurai warrior. They're ready for everything all the time. And it's exactly that same mindset that we're talking about.
Because they're highly trained.
Exactly. So this
because
does take
of the
training.
Repetition and
Repetition
doing it
and focusing on that task of practicing anticipation.
I can't imagine a more right-thinking concept than this.
Yeah, it's way up there. And one of the ways it affects my play, I play primarily table poker, is because I've anticipated what's going to happen, it makes my mechanics almost like eerily scripted. Even these big moments, these big dramatic moments, say to no, or even a limit game, So let's say it's a case where a guy bets the river and I raise him, and I'm making let's say I've got like the board's ace, king, queen, jack, and I've got ace, king, and I think that he just fired a bet out of there on momentum, and I raise him, realizing that okay, he might call here with two pair, with a lesser two pair or whatever, but I've already decided in advance if he re-raises, I know I'm going to fold. So the way the betting goes is he bets, I raise, he re-raises, I muck, and I muck so fast that it's like spooks my opponents because they're like, wow, how could you have done that? It's because I already saw the future. I had already decided before I raised that I was going to fold when he re-raised. So that might not have been the best example, but they come up at no limit all the time. Exactly those moments where other people are hesitating and thinking or acting like they're thinking, it's boom, I'm re-raising, I'm folding, or whatever, because I'm anticipated. So it increases the accuracy, the correctness of the plays, and it levels out your emotional landscape.
The other day I stepped on a rake and it hit me right in the nose. And that was when I realized the impact of the rake.
It hurts.
It hurts bad.
It's bloody. It's brutal.
A friend of mine and I were playing in a 100-200 limit game.
Oh, what? You've never played in a 100-200 game in your life. Are you talking 100-200 pennies?
Okay, well, I play it in my mind, all right? No, it was a 4-8 fixed limit game. And neither one of us were winning, and he was playing a lot more hands than I was. Both of our stacks were going down, and he looks at me and he says, nobody's got any chips. And that's when I realized people don't understand the impact of the rake.
Yeah, well, especially the low limits. I mean, I used to run a game for years, and people would rebuy a rack of chips, and they would just go down the hole. I mean, I would just like, in fact, I watched the money flow so quickly into my pocket that I came up with this little analogy, which is, think of the poker table as a punch bowl. And everyone comes in and sits around the bowl, and everyone dumps their own punch in, and that's the money, right? And then what we do is we sit around this punch bowl with a straw, and we suck the punch out. We try to suck it out faster than the guy next to us, and that would be our profit. If poker really were a zero-sum game, all the money that goes in would come out, which it is, say, in a non-rake home game, right? But in the casino, what you can do is conceptualize that there's a hole at the bottom of this bowl. So as we're all trying to suck as fast as we can, there's money drizzling out this hole. Now, the size of the hole in ratio to the bowl depends on the stakes. If you're playing 1,000, 2,000, and it's normal casino rake, it's a teeny, teeny, teeny little hole. Almost all the punch that goes in comes out. But if you're playing at, say, 3-6 at a casino, like, or 1-2 blinds at very low stakes, you can just picture this hole is so significant. It sometimes can be so big that nobody can win.
Right.
It's impossible to win. So
you gave the analogy of a 3-6 player who's probably the best in the world. He's making 3 big bets an hour. He's breaking even.
yeah, let's say the rake plus tips is $18 an hour. Okay, which it with $4 rake now plus a jackpot, plus a tip, right? Even for a relatively tight player, he could easily be paying $18 an hour a 3-6 game.
And thinking he's just a break-even player.
Exactly. Let's say his skill over his opponents he's 3 big bets an hour better than his opponents, which is huge. Right. And he keeps his daily records. At the end of the year, he looks at his ledger and he's like, "Oh, I broke even for the year." But what really happened is, and he thinks in his mind he's a break-even player. This is why this is so important to separate out the rake as a business expense, because it gives you an accurate depiction of your skill. The lower the stakes, the more extreme the warpage is. Here's a guy who's the best player probably as you can be at limit hold'em, earning 3 big bets an hour, and he thinks he's a break-even player because he's earning 3 big bets an hour, but he's paying 3 big bets an hour. So the typical way we keep score is to just look at what we walked in with, what we walked out with.
Now, your typical 1-2 no limit player is saying, well, the rake doesn't impact me the same way it does the 2-4, 3-6, 4-8 limit player, but it does, doesn't it?
Oh, sure. The way to look at that is if you're talking about at a casino, a live casino, the stat you want to look at is what is the casino dropping per table per hour. And very often it's in the range of $100 to $200. So let's say that there's 10 players and the casino is taking $150 an hour in rake plus tips. That means that the average expense per player is $15, right? So if you're tighter than the typical player, then you're probably paying 10 to 12, and the looser players are paying 18 to 20 because the casino's going to get their $150 an hour. But you're still going to be getting hit pretty hard at say $12 an hour for a low stake game. And everything I just said there applies to online poker. Of course, you could just change the time unit to 100 hands or do whatever adjustments you need to make. So the main thing, though, of this section to take away is just the idea of knowing the data, of separating it out. Like if you were running a dry cleaning business, you wouldn't think of your rent of your building, of your lease, as just like nothing, right? What you want to do is think of the house rake as like chair rental. Mm-hmm. It should be part of your business ledger as you either evaluate what games you should be playing or make projections about your future and all of that.
That's how right thinking is about the rake. Well, let's talk about rules. What is right thinking in the rules?
Right thinking in the rules is basically don't think about them as good or bad,
okay,
or right or wrong.
Next. Oh,
yeah.
You're not finished.
no, that's pretty much it.
Oh, we've got a rule about that.
In the spirit of what can we do to modify our thinking so that we play our A game more often? This is one of those things. So like let's say you are used to playing in Foxwoods, or you're used to playing in Atlantic City, or you're used to playing on Full Tilt or Poker Stars or whatever, and you've got your home base. What tends to happen is we tend to think of those rules, whatever they are, as being
the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when we go to another place, when we have resistance to the rules there, that throws us off. That's mind noise, which we're going to talk a lot more about later. And that is exactly the type of thing that can have only one effect on us. It's not going to make you play better. When you go to a new casino and you sit there and you think, this is a dumb rule, that is going to be more likely to have you play your non-A game than if you sit there and you are already in a state of complete acceptance and understanding that of course the rules are going to be different when you go somewhere else. And when you do encounter new rules, you want to adapt to them if you need to alter anything, whether it's buy-ins or betting or whatever. Let's say there's some blind structure like up in the Bay Area that you've never heard of. People come and they look at this. I've watched it a million times. They come to Lucky Chances and they're like, wow, this is the dumbest blind structure I've ever seen. I'm like, that guy has just created a negative state in his mind over something he has absolutely no control over, right? So anytime you resist a new rule as thinking this is dumb, this is stupid, that's definitely wrong thinking. Right thinking is, of course there's going to be new rules and new experiences everywhere I go, and you want to just greet them with in a state of non-resistance.
So what you're saying is the rule is the rules is the rules.
Yeah. Okay, Wayne, let me ask you something. What is the difference between a goal and a target?
A goal is something that you reach and you make a new goal. A target is something that you want to hit over and over and over again.
Good, good. So when it comes to poker, do you set goals? Do you think, okay, I want to play so many hands this month, or I want to make this amount of money this month, or what do you do when you look into the future and you like make ideas about grand plans?
Well, because I don't think goals are something that should be easily met. My goal is to play perfect poker, and perfect poker to me is making the correct decisions.
Mm-hmm.
My target is to make the correct decision this time.
Okay. So, but to play, would you say that playing perfect poker is an unattainable goal? So you set goals that are kind of out of reach. So
Pretty much, yeah. I don't think, because goals are so important to us, that if we don't hit them, we feel like a failure.
right.
But if you create a goal that's pretty much unattainable, you'll never feel like a failure because I'm not going
that's
to make
right.
it anyway.
You know you can hit anyway. Okay, so
Right.
that's like your little safety valve.
Exactly.
But if you were to set a goal that was attainable, but you didn't attain it, then that's where the failure really.
Yeah, absolutely.
really
I don't want to
kicks in.
think, God, I wanted to play 40 hours this month and I only got 35. Man, I really suck.
Yeah.
I don't want to think that.
Right.
All I want to do is play my A game,
Uh-huh.
and my A game is making the correct decision. If I'm tired, I should have gone home. Now I'm not playing my A game. I'm not making the correct decisions. So therefore, my goal is not reached. But my target is, okay, today I'm going to do this. And if I don't hit it, I can come back tomorrow.
Right.
Just because you don't hit a target doesn't mean you're a failure.
Right. Well, we're perfectly aligned on this. One of my favorite topics is the distinction between a goal and a target.
Wow, it's only taken me almost 2 episodes for me to actually hit my goal of Tommy saying, wow, that was really good.
Well, it was. And, I mean...
I'm going to have to set a new goal now.
One of my favorite things to do is throw projectiles, rocks at whatever. I like to, like if I'm near a body of water, I love to take a log and throw it out in the lake and then just like throw rocks at it. It's just like drifting along and throw another one out there.
Remind me not to go on a walk with you.
Well, but what I've learned from doing that is, okay, if I throw a rock at a log or a tree and I miss it, it's no big deal. I mean, I knew the chances are I weren't going to actually hit it anyway. Sometimes I come closer than other times. So it's like, okay, that was a nice shot or that was a bad shot. And then I'd pick up another rock and throw it again, right? But if I were sitting there and I was putting like a pass-fail on this, it's like, okay, I'm going to, my goal is to hit this, or my goal is to, make $100,000 in some amount of time. And then I don't get it. It's exactly like you said. Goals, by their very nature, it's a word that sets up success or failure. And I believe that is detrimental to a poker player. I think it's much better to think of whatever sort of projections of things you hope to happen in the future, is think of it as targets. And so you aim at a target, and sometimes you hit it, sometimes you miss it. But you're not bogged down by that. You just pick up another rock and throw again.
To have goals in poker, to me, is counterproductive. Don't you have enough pressure on you?
Yeah.
You need to set yourself more pressure by setting goals that you've got to hit.
Right.
I've got enough on my plate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and what you said is great about, just trying to play the hand. This is another thing that's great about the difference between targets and goals, is goals have a an inherent time frame that takes you into the future. Well, we don't want to be in the future. The whole idea of playing our A game now requires existing in the now. So if you have a goal of attaining something, no matter what it is, it automatically has future built in. Well, as we're going to learn more when we talk about the mind stuff, things that pull us into the future are by definition detrimental to playing our A game as much as possible. That's the real bad thing about goals. Whereas targets, like you said, of having the target of playing this next hand well, or playing this current street well, or saying the right things, or thinking the right things, a target can be in the moment, and then in the next moment, and then in the next moment can be a constant stream of present tense attempts. I also believe that some words lend themselves to right thinking better than other words. And that's why we have this topic here, is because the word target lends itself to the right thinking, which is an in-the-moment ongoing process, whereas goals are in the future, in the past, all the places we don't want to be.
C game is the ultimate in poker suffering. And Buddha talked a lot about suffering. What would Buddha have said about lopping off the C game?
Well, he would have had a lot to say about it. In fact, when people asked him, what is the core of your teaching? And he taught for 45 years after he attained enlightenment. And what he said was, I teach about suffering. That is his topic. That's it. And you know, the outline that this series is based on, the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment, is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, as Buddha taught them. And so it's rather an easy step to correlate. We could say, okay, there's suffering, which, you know, there's anger and jealousy and disappointment, all, you know, unease. This is what we mean by suffering. And then there's, in the poker world, we have our specific kind, which is the C game, when we're at our worst, when we're tilted, or whatever you want to call it. And so it's an easy step to take the actual teachings of Buddha as he taught them about suffering and just insert the word C game, and the same thing applies, because what he taught was how to eliminate suffering, how to make it go away. And what we want to do as we try to lop off our C game is make it go away. So I'm just going to whip through real quick the first three Noble Truths as they were taught. The first is that C game exists. If you're going to be a poker player, you are going to have C game, and there's no way around it. And everyone has C game. And that is just the way it is if you're going to play poker. The second Noble Truth is the cause of C game, which is attachment, which is desire. It's exactly the same cause of all suffering, and it rears its ugly head in poker and causes C game. So that it would be, let's say, the second Noble Truth of poker C game.
So let those aces go.
Yeah, exactly. So only when we truly understand the cause of C game can we move to the third Noble Truth, which is how to end it, which is how to be unattached, how to be not full of craving. This is the way to eliminate C game. Now, when I say it in just a few words like that, that isn't enough for anybody to actually go out and do it. This is like the general teaching, okay, that C game exists, that there is a cause of C game, and it can be known, and that by knowing the cause, it can be ended. Those are the first three Noble Truths. The fourth Noble Truth is the instruction manual, is the Eightfold Path, which is right view, right thinking. All these 8 things that we're going through is the instruction sheet. And in the next episode, which is right mindfulness, these are the practices that more than any other dig right to the heart of undoing the cause of C game, which would then undo the C game. So that seems like a good place to leave off here.
I can't wait to get there.